Rain fell softly over the city, turning the streets into long lines of silver light. Neon signs flickered, taxis moved slowly through traffic, and most people hurried home without looking at anyone else. Ethan Walker was one of them. Tired after a long shift at a small repair shop, his hands still smelled of oil and metal. His mind focused only on reaching his apartment and getting some sleep. He always took the same shortcut through a narrow alley between two old buildings. It was quiet there, darker than the main road, but it saved him 10 minutes every night. That night something felt different. The air seemed colder, even though it was summer. Ethan slowed his steps when he noticed a shape near the wall at the end of the alley. At first he thought it was just a pile of trash bags, but then it moved very slightly. He stopped, his heart beat faster. He almost turned around, but something told him to look again. A young woman was sitting on the wet ground, her back pressed against the brick wall. Her clothes looked strange, not torn, not dirty, but not normal either. The fabric shimmered faintly under the weak streetlight, like it was made of thin metal threads. Her hair was dark and wet from the rain, covering part of her face. She looked injured, but she was not crying. She was simply staring forward as if she was waiting. Ethan swallowed and stepped closer. "Hey, are you okay?" he asked softly. His voice echoed slightly in the narrow space. She lifted her head slowly. Her eyes met his for 1 second. Just 1 second. He saw something impossible. A faint blue glowed deep inside her pupils. It disappeared so fast he almost believed he imagined it. I am fine," she said, but her voice sounded strange. Her words were careful, like someone learning a language for the first time. Ethan frowned. She did not sound drunk or confused. She sounded precise, too precise. "You're sitting in the rain," Ethan said gently. "That's not fine." He removed his jacket without thinking and placed it over her shoulders. She looked down at the jacket like it was something very valuable. Her fingers touched the fabric slowly, studying it. "Why would you give this to me?" she asked. Her tone carried real confusion. "Because you look cold," Ethan replied simply. She stared at him for a long moment, as if trying to understand something much deeper than his words. Ethan noticed a small metal object in her hand. It was no bigger than a coin, perfectly round, smooth, and glowing faintly under the surface. Symbols moved across it like tiny stars shifting in space. He blinked. The glow faded again. "Are you hurt?" he asked, kneeling slightly to see if she had any visible injuries. Before she could answer, a low sound filled the alley. It was not thunder. It was mechanical, smooth and controlled. Ethan turned his head toward the street entrance. 2 black vehicles had stopped at the corner. Their lights were off, but their engines were running. The woman's body became still. Her fingers tightened around the metal object. "They found me," she whispered. Her voice was calm, but her eyes showed something else, fear. "Who found you?" Ethan asked, his stomach tightened. The doors of the vehicles opened at the same time. 4 men stepped out. They wore dark suits, but they did not move like normal security or police. Their steps were slow and confident, like hunters who already knew where their prey was hiding. One of them held a small device that emitted a soft scanning light across the walls. Ethan's heart pounded. "Do you know them?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she answered. "They are not from your authorities." "Then who are they?" She looked at him again. That blue glow flickered briefly in her eyes, brighter this time. "They should not be here," she said, almost to herself. The scanning device beeped softly. One of the men turned toward the alley. His voice was low but clear. "We located her." Ethan felt a sudden wave of cold run through his body. He did not understand what was happening, but he knew one thing. The fear in the woman's eyes was real. She looked up at him slowly. Rain continued to fall around them. "Please," she said softly, "do not let them take me." For a second, Ethan hesitated. This was not his problem. He did not know her. He did not understand any of this. But she looked alone and scared and strangely human in that moment. The men began walking toward the alley entrance. Their steps echoed against the walls. The scanning light grew brighter, sweeping closer. Ethan made a decision he would never fully understand. He reached down and helped her stand. "Can you run?" he asked quietly. She nodded once. Her grip on the small metal object tightened. "Then we move now." Ethan said, trying to keep his voice steady. As they stepped deeper into the shadows of the alley, the man at the entrance raised his head slightly and spoke into a hidden microphone. Target confirmed. The woman leaned closer to Ethan and whispered, "If they catch me, your world will not remain untouched." Ethan did not know what she meant. He did not know who she truly was. But as the dark figures entered the alley and the air seemed to vibrate with quiet danger, he understood that this was no normal night. And somewhere far above the clouds, unseen by anyone on Earth, something massive shifted silently in orbit, watching, waiting. The moment Ethan heard the words "target confirmed," something inside him shifted from confusion to pure instinct. He did not ask more questions. He did not try to understand the larger picture. He simply grabbed her hand and pulled her toward the far end of the alley. The rain grew heavier, hitting the metal fire escapes above them and filling the night with sharp echoes behind them. The men's footsteps quickened, calm but fast, like they already knew escape was only temporary. "Left," she whispered suddenly. Her voice was steady now, clearer than before. Ethan did not question how she knew the layout of city she supposedly did not belong to. He turned left into a narrow side path between two buildings barely wide enough for one person. Trash bins blocked part of the way. Ethan kicked them aside, the loud crash echoing down the street. A bright white beam of scanning light cut through the rain behind them, sweeping across the walls like a searching eye. One of the men spoke again, his voice distant but precise. "Subject is moving northeast. Increase perimeter." "They are communicating," she said quietly while running. "They are connected." "Connected how?" Ethan asked, breathing hard. "Through network beyond your systems," she replied, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. They reached the end of the path and emerged onto a wider street. Cars moved slowly, unaware of the chase unfolding just meters away. Ethan looked back. The men had not run. They were walking with calm certainty, yet somehow they were already closer than they should have been. "That's not possible," Ethan muttered, his chest burned. "They predict movement," she answered. "They calculate choices before you make them." "Great," Ethan replied under his breath. No pressure then. They crossed the street between cars, horns blaring as drivers shouted in anger. The woman moved beside him with surprising balance. Her steps were light, almost silent. At one point she stumbled slightly, and Ethan tightened his grip, expecting her to fall. Instead, she corrected herself instantly. Too fast, almost unnatural. For half a second, her form shimmered, like heat rising from asphalt. Ethan blinked, and she was normal again, human again. "What was that?" he asked, slowing for just a moment. "My stabilizer is failing," she replied calmly, holding the small metal disc tighter. "I cannot fully maintain this appearance without energy." "Appearance," Ethan repeated, but there was no time for answers. A sudden sharp sound split the air. Not a gunshot. Not exactly, but something controlled and focused. A blue pulse struck the wall inches from Ethan's shoulder, melting the brick in a liquid glass before fading away. "They are escalating," she said softly. "Yeah, I noticed," Ethan replied, panic rising in his voice for the first time. They turned into an underground subway entrance, sliding down wet stairs. The station below was nearly empty at this hour. A single train sat waiting with its doors open, lights flickering slightly inside. "Inside," Ethan said, pulling her toward the train. They rushed in just as the doors began to close. The train moved slowly at first, then faster, carrying them into the dark tunnel. For a brief moment, Ethan allowed himself to breathe. His reflection in the window looked pale, shocked, confused. He turned toward her. "Start explaining," he said between breaths. She sat across from him, perfectly straight despite everything. Her eyes seemed brighter in the dim light. "They serve the High Directorate," she said. "They were sent to retrieve me before I could make contact." "Contact with who?" She hesitated, studying his face carefully. "With your world." "My world." Ethan almost laughed, but the sound died quickly. "You talk like you're not from here." "I am not," she answered simply. The train lights flickered again, stronger this time. Ethan noticed something else. The air felt charged like before a storm. He glanced at the metal disc in her hand. It now glowed steadily, symbols moving faster across its surface. "Are they tracking that thing?" he asked. "Yes," she replied, "and me." As if on cue, the train suddenly slowed, the intercom crackled with static, but no voice followed. The lights dimmed, then shifted to emergency red. "That's not good," Ethan said quietly. She closed her eyes for a second, concentrating. "They have accessed your city systems." The train came to a full stop in the middle of the tunnel. Darkness swallowed everything beyond the faint red lights. Footsteps echoed from the far end of the train car, slow and deliberate. Ethan turned, heart pounding. The door at the other end slid open with a soft mechanical sound. One of the suited men stepped inside, his expression calm, untouched by effort. "Your resistance is inefficient," the man said in a controlled voice. "Return with us peacefully." Ethan stood up without thinking, placing himself between the man and the woman. His legs shook, but he did not step aside. "You're not taking her," Ethan said, surprised at how steady his voice sounded. The man's eyes shifted slightly, analyzing him. "You misunderstand the scale of this situation," he replied. The woman slowly rose behind Ethan. Her form flickered again, stronger this time. For a split second, her silhouette expanded, taller, more radiant, something ancient and powerful hidden beneath the human shape. The suited man paused, just briefly. That hesitation was small, but Ethan saw it. "You are interfering in matters beyond your species," the man warned calmly. She placed her hand gently on Ethan's shoulder, and for the first time her voice carried quiet authority. "You are the ones interfering," she said. The tunnel vibrated softly, not from the train, but from something far above, something massive, shifting position in the sky. The suited man's earpiece lit faintly. He listened, then looked at her with new calculation. "The window is closing," he said. Ethan did not know what window meant, but he knew one thing clearly now. This chase was not just about capturing a runaway woman. It was about something much bigger. And whatever was happening above Earth at this very moment, it was connected to her. The red emergency lights inside the train flickered again, casting long shadows across the walls. Ethan could hear his own heartbeat louder than the hum of the stopped engine. The suited man at the far end of the car did not move closer. He simply stood there with calm patience, as if time itself worked for him. The small light in his earpiece glowed faintly, receiving silent instructions from somewhere beyond the tunnel. Ethan swallowed and tightened his fists. "We're not going anywhere with you," he said, trying to sound braver than he felt. The man's expression did not change. "Your involvement is unnecessary," he replied. "Step aside." Before Ethan could answer, the woman gently pulled him back. Her touch felt warmer now, almost electric. "This space is unstable," she said quietly. Her eyes were no longer just faintly blue. They glowed clearly in the dim train car, deep and powerful. Ethan turned to her, confusion and fear mixing inside him. "What's unstable?" "Reality," she answered softly. At that exact moment, the lights went completely dark. For 2 seconds there was nothing but silence. Then a deep vibration rolled through the tunnel. Not like an earthquake, but something controlled, something arriving. When the emergency lights returned, the suited man was gone. The train car door stood open, empty tunnel stretching beyond it. Ethan looked around quickly. Where did he go? "He was recalled," she said calmly. "Recalled by who?" She did not answer right away. Instead, she walked slowly to the train window and looked into the darkness outside, as if she could see far beyond what human eyes could detect. "We cannot stay here," she said. "They will adjust their strategy." Ethan did not understand how she spoke with such certainty, but he felt it too. The air had changed. He followed her as she moved toward the emergency exit door at the side of the train. The panel beside it blinked red, locked by the system. She placed her glowing metal disc against the panel. The symbols on its surface began spinning faster, and within seconds the door clicked open with a soft hiss. "You hacked it?" Ethan asked, amazed despite everything. "I requested access," she replied, stepping into the tunnel. The darkness felt heavier down there. The tunnel walls stretched endlessly in both directions. Only small maintenance lights guided their path. They walked quickly along the narrow side platform, the sound of dripping water echoing around them. After several minutes, they reached an old service ladder leading up to a sealed maintenance door. Ethan climbed first and pushed it open with effort. They emerged into an abandoned warehouse above the tracks. Dust filled the air, and broken machines sat like forgotten skeletons under the high ceiling. For the first time since the chase began, there was silence. Ethan turned to her, breathing hard. "Okay," he said firmly. "You're not human. You're being hunted by men with technology I've never seen, and something huge is happening in the sky. I need answers." She stood still for a long moment, as if measuring how much truth he could handle. Then she raised her hand slowly to her wrist, where a thin silver band rested against her skin. "This device maintains your comfort," she said softly. Before Ethan could react, she removed the band. The change was not violent. It was smooth, almost graceful. Her body shimmered like light passing through water. Her height increased slightly. Her posture became straighter, stronger. The simple clothes she wore shifted into something elegant and structured, glowing faintly with patterns that moved like living constellations. Her hair seemed darker, richer, flowing as if touched by unseen wind, and her eyes, no longer faintly glowing, now shone like twin stars, steady and powerful. Ethan stepped back, not in fear, but in shock. "You're not of your species," she finished calmly. The warehouse lights flickered once, as if reacting to her presence. "My name cannot be pronounced in your language," she continued, "but you may call me Lyra." "Lyra," Ethan repeated slowly, trying to anchor himself to something normal. "I'm not simply a traveler," she said, walking toward a broken window and looking out at the city skyline. "I'm the sovereign ruler of the Aurelian Dominion." Ethan blinked. "Sovereign ruler means—" "Queen," she answered simply. The word hung heavy in the dusty air. "You're a queen?" he asked, unable to hide the disbelief in his voice. "Yes," she said, turning back toward him, "and my presence on your planet was never meant to be discovered." "Then why are you here?" Her glowing eyes softened slightly. "To observe," she said, "to understand humanity without influence." "And those men? They serve a faction within my empire," she replied. "They believe Earth should be absorbed immediately, before your species advances further." "Absorb," Ethan repeated, feeling cold again. "Controlled," she clarified gently. "Governed, guided, restricted." Ethan ran a hand through his hair, trying to process everything. "So, they want to take you back. They want to prevent me from making a decision," she said quietly. "What decision?" Before she could answer, a low rumble echoed through the warehouse. Not from the ground, but from above. The dusty windows trembled slightly. Lyra turned toward the sky. Her expression changed from calm to something more complex, something powerful. "They're no longer waiting," she said softly. Ethan moved to the window beside her and looked up. At first he saw only clouds, dark and heavy. Then the clouds parted slowly, unnaturally. Something massive hovered above the city, almost invisible against the night sky, a shape too large to fully understand, stretching across the horizon like a silent shadow. Lights moved across its surface in precise lines. Ethan's breath stopped. "That's not." "It is," Lyra replied quietly. His mind raced. "That thing is above the entire city." "Yes," she said, her voice steady again, "and it is not alone." As more faint shapes became visible beyond the clouds, Ethan realized the truth was far bigger than he imagined. This was not just about a queen hiding on Earth. It was about an empire watching from the stars, waiting for a command. The massive shape above the clouds did not flash or fire or make dramatic sounds. It simply remained there, silent and absolute, stretching across the night sky like a second horizon. From the ground, it almost looked like a trick of light, a strange shadow mixed with storm clouds. But Ethan knew it was real. He could feel it in his chest, a low vibration that did not belong to Earth. More shapes slowly became visible behind it, smaller, but still enormous. forming a quiet formation high above the atmosphere. The city below had not fully noticed yet. Cars still moved, neon signs still flickered, but phones were starting to rise toward the sky as people pointed at strange distortions in the clouds. "This was not the plan," Lyra said softly, though her voice carried strength. "You call this not the plan?" Ethan asked, still staring upward. "There's a fleet over my planet." "Yes," she answered calmly, "and they are waiting for authority to act." Ethan turned to her, finally understanding something important. The men in suits, the chase, the ship in orbit, it all centered on her. "They're waiting for you," he said quietly. Lyra did not deny it. She stood taller now, no longer hiding what she was. The faint, glowing patterns across her attire pulsed slowly, like controlled energy beneath the surface. She no longer looked like someone being hunted. She looked like someone who commanded stars. A sudden bright line of light cut through the clouds, descending slowly toward the city. It was not chaotic, it was precise. It stopped above an open industrial zone several blocks away, forming a vertical beam that connected sky to ground. "They are landing," Lyra said. "Landing," Ethan repeated, panic returning. "Here? In this city? They must present themselves formally," she replied. "Protocol demands it." "Protocol?" Ethan almost laughed in disbelief. "You bring warships and call it protocol?" Her eyes softened slightly at his reaction. "To them, this is restraint." The warehouse trembled again as distant sirens began to echo through the streets. Military helicopters rose into the air, their blades cutting through the rain. News alerts started buzzing across phones worldwide. Social media filled instantly with blurry images of the sky. Governments scrambled to respond. Within minutes, live broadcasts showed the massive ship clearly hovering above the city. Analysts shouted over each other. Military leaders demanded explanations, and world leaders were rushed into emergency meetings. Ethan stepped back from a window, his thoughts racing. "You said they want to absorb Earth," he said. "That doesn't sound peaceful." "It is efficient," Lyra corrected calmly. "And what do you want?" he asked directly. For the first time, she hesitated. "I wanted to observe humanity without fear," she admitted quietly, "to understand your species beyond data and predictions." "By pretending to be human?" "Yes," she said, meeting his eyes, "and I learned something unexpected." Before he could ask what that was, a powerful wave of energy pulsed through the air. The warehouse lights exploded in sparks, and outside the window the vertical beam intensified. A shape formed within the beam, descending slowly toward the ground, tall and armored, surrounded by controlled light. "They have sent a high commander," Lyra said, her voice steady but colder now. "Is that bad?" Ethan asked. "It means they expect resistance," she replied. Moments later, military vehicles surrounded the industrial zone. Human soldiers took positions with weapons aimed at the beam of light, but none of them fired because deep down they understood their weapons were meaningless against what stood inside that column of energy. The armored figures stepped onto the ground. The beam faded instantly, leaving behind a tall being encased in sleek metallic armor that shimmered like liquid silver. His presence alone seemed to bend the air around him. A global broadcast signal suddenly interrupted every screen on Earth. The image of the armored commander appeared worldwide. His voice translated instantly into every language. "People of Earth," he said calmly, "you are not under attack. You are under evaluation." Fear spread across the planet faster than any invasion could. Inside the warehouse, Ethan stared at Lyra. "Evaluation?" She nodded slowly. "The Dominion does not conquer blindly." "Then why are they here with warships?" he demanded. "To ensure compliance if necessary," she answered honestly. The commander continued, speaking through the broadcast. "Your planet shelters an individual of extreme importance to the Dominion. She must return immediately. Any obstruction will be interpreted as hostility." Ethan's eyes widened. "They're talking about you." "Yes," Lyra replied quietly. "And if you don't go?" The glowing patterns on her attire brightened slightly, reflecting the seriousness of the moment. "Then they will consider Earth compromised," she said, "and they will remove uncertainty." "Remove uncertainty?" Ethan whispered, already knowing the meaning. Erase variables, she clarified, her voice calm but heavy. Silence filled the warehouse, broken only by distant sirens and the echo of helicopters circling above. Ethan took a slow breath, trying to steady himself. "So what now?" he asked. Lyra walked toward the broken window again, looking down at the city she had quietly studied for months. Her expression shifted from observer to ruler, from hidden traveler to sovereign queen. "They expect me to comply," she said softly. "Will you?" Ethan asked. Before she could answer, the warehouse door behind them exploded inward with controlled force. Dust and debris scattered across the floor. Standing in the doorway was the armored commander himself, taller than any human, his presence filling the room without effort, his glowing visor fixed directly on Lyra. "Your Majesty," he said with measured respect, "the Council requests your immediate return." Ethan stepped instinctively in front of her, though he felt small under the commander's gaze. The commander tilted his head slightly, observing the human who dared to stand between him and a galactic queen. "You align yourself with a primitive species," the commander said calmly. "This is unexpected." Lyra stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Ethan's shoulder, her voice no longer uncertain, but commanding. "They are not primitive," she said firmly. "They are unmeasured." The commander's visor dimmed slightly as he processed her words. "Your Majesty," he replied, "the fleet awaits your directive." Outside, the massive ships shifted positions subtly, weapons systems powering quietly but visibly. The fate of Earth now rested not in human governments, not in military defense, but in the decision of the Queen standing in that broken warehouse, and the human who had helped her in a rainy alley without knowing who she truly was. The air inside the broken warehouse felt heavier than before, as if gravity itself had increased. The armored commander stood motionless in the doorway, yet his presence filled every corner of the room. Outside, the faint hum of the fleet above the city vibrated through the walls, steady and patient, waiting for a single word from their queen. Ethan could feel his legs shaking, but he did not step aside. He did not fully understand why he was still standing there, facing a being from another world, but something inside him refused to move. The commander's glowing visor lowered slightly, focusing on him with calm curiosity. "You obstruct an imperial retrieval," the commander said, his voice deep and perfectly controlled. "Explain your logic." Ethan swallowed, searching for words. "You chased her through my city," he said, trying to keep his voice steady. "You shut down our systems. You aimed weapons at us. That doesn't look like a peaceful retrieval." The commander paused, almost analyzing the emotional tone of his response. "Force ensures efficiency," he replied. "Fear destroys trust." Ethan answered without thinking. For the first time, the glowing visor dimmed slightly, a micro-hesitation, small but noticeable. Lyra stepped forward slowly, her posture straight and regal. The glowing patterns across her attire brightened with quiet authority. "Commander Varric," she said calmly, "stand down." The armored figure bowed his head slightly, but he did not withdraw. "Your Majesty, the Council fears contamination," he said. "Your prolonged interaction with this species introduces unpredictable variables." "Variables?" Ethan repeated softly. Lyra's gaze remained fixed on the commander. "Humanity is not contamination," she said firmly. "It is potential." The commander's stance shifted slightly. "Potential is inefficient without control," he replied. "The Dominion thrives on order." Ethan felt something spark inside him at those words. He stepped forward again despite the risk. "Order without choice isn't strength," he said. "It's just control." The warehouse fell silent again. Even the distant sirens outside seemed quieter. The commander slowly turned his helmet toward Ethan. "You speak boldly for a species with no interstellar presence." "Maybe," Ethan admitted, "but we're still here. We build, we learn, we survive, without your empire telling us how." Lyra watched him carefully, something deeper moving behind her glowing eyes. "Your Majesty," the commander said, turning back to her. "If you refuse immediate return, the Council will initiate protective assimilation of this planet. Protective? Ethan whispered, already knowing that word meant something darker. It ensures stability, the commander clarified, and removes freedom, Lyra added quietly. Outside, across the entire world, military leaders watched live satellite feeds of the alien fleet, waiting for signs of aggression. News anchors speculated about invasion. Governments prepared emergency responses, but none of them understood that the true decision was happening in an abandoned warehouse. Lyra turned slowly toward Ethan, lowering her voice. "If I return with them now," she said softly, "Earth will be cataloged, monitored, and eventually integrated under Dominion rule." "And if you don't?" he asked. "The Council may consider Earth hostile," she answered honestly. "They will not risk an unknown factor growing beyond their control." Ethan took a deep breath, feeling the weight of billions of lives pressing invisibly around him. "What do you want?" he asked her directly, not as a subject speaking to a queen, but as one person to another. Lyra hesitated, and for the first time since revealing her true form, she looked uncertain. "I wanted to understand why your species acts against logical advantage," she admitted. "Why you protect strangers, why you choose empathy over efficiency." Ethan gave a small, tired smile. "We don't always choose it," he said honestly, "but when we do, it matters." The commander's voice interrupted. "Sentiment does not alter galactic structure." "No," Lyra said calmly, "but it can alter leadership." She stepped forward until she stood directly in front of the armored commander, her presence no longer hidden, no longer cautious. She was every part the queen of an interstellar empire, and the warehouse seemed too small to contain her authority. "Commander Varric," she said clearly, "you and the fleet will power down offensive systems immediately." The commander did not respond right away. His visor flickered faintly as he connected to distant minds across the fleet. "The Council will resist this directive," he warned. "They may resist," Lyra replied, "but I am the final authority." The silence stretched for several long seconds. Outside, the massive ships above the city shifted slightly. The faint glow along their hulls dimmed. Weapons arrays that had been quietly charging began to cool. Military satellites around Earth detected the change instantly. Panic began to shift into confusion. Inside the warehouse, the commander slowly knelt on one knee, armor reflecting the broken light around him. "The fleet stands down," he said at last. Ethan released a breath he did not realize he had been holding, but Lyra was not finished. She turned her gaze upward, as if speaking to something far beyond the warehouse walls. "Council of the Dominion," she said, her voice resonating with quiet power. "I reject forced assimilation of Earth." The air vibrated slightly, as if her words traveled through unseen channels across space. "This species possesses a strength you have underestimated," she continued. "Their compassion is not weakness, it is resilience." Ethan stared at her, stunned. "I will not rule through fear," Lyra declared, "and Earth will not be absorbed." For a brief moment, nothing happened. The fleet remained suspended above the planet, silent, calculating. Then a low, distant pulse rippled through the sky, not as a threat, but as acknowledgement. Commander Varric rose slowly. "The Council has requested formal review," he said. "Your decision alters strategic balance across 3 sectors." Lyra's expression remained steady. "Then they will adapt," she replied. Ethan looked between them, heart still racing. "So that's it?" he asked cautiously. Varric turned his visor toward him once more. "This is not over, human," he said calmly. "You have influenced Imperial direction without authority." Ethan managed a small shrug despite everything. "I didn't try to," he said. "That is precisely the concern," the commander answered quietly. Outside, across the planet, people continued watching the sky, unaware that humanity's future had just shifted because one ordinary man chose to help a stranger in the rain, and because that stranger turned out to be far more powerful than anyone could imagine. The fleet did not leave. It remained in orbit like a silent crown around the planet, no longer threatening, but still powerful enough to remind every government on Earth how small they truly were. News networks called it a standoff. Military analysts called it strategic restraint. But inside the abandoned warehouse, Ethan realized something far greater had just happened. A galactic empire had paused because one queen chose differently. Commander Varric stood tall once more, his armor reflecting faint pulses of distant starlight through the broken window. "The Council demands clarification," he said calmly. "You have halted assimilation. You must present an alternative." Lyra did not hesitate this time. She stepped forward, her presence filling the warehouse like rising sunlight. "I will," she replied. Ethan looked at her carefully, sensing that something even bigger was coming. "Alternative?" he asked quietly. "Yes," she answered, her glowing eyes turning toward the sky. "If Earth is not absorbed, it must be protected." Varric tilted his head slightly. "Protection requires allocation of Imperial assets," he said. "Your personal authority would be required." Lyra's expression remained steady. "Then I will use it." Ethan frowned. "Use what exactly?" She turned to him slowly, and for the first time since the chaos began, there was something almost human in her gaze, something vulnerable but strong. "You think wealth is currency," she said softly. "But in my dominion, wealth is reach." She raised her hand slightly, and the glowing patterns across her attire shifted, forming small holographic projections in the air between them. Ethan saw rotating star systems, energy routes, planets marked with symbols he could not understand, fleets, colonies, trade corridors stretching across unimaginable distances. "I control 312 inhabited systems," Lyra continued calmly. 74 major trade networks, 16 primary energy cores that power half the inner sectors. Ethan stared at the projection, overwhelmed. "That's not just wealth," he whispered. "It is influence," Varric corrected. Lyra nodded once. "I possess independent command over strategic reserves," she said. "Resources capable of rebuilding worlds, altering economies, accelerating development by centuries." Ethan slowly understood the scale. "You're not just a queen," he said quietly. "You're one of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy." Lyra did not smile, but there was quiet truth in his words. "My personal holdings exceed the gross output of multiple empires," she admitted without pride, "and I will invest them here." Varric's visor flickered brighter for a moment. "Your Majesty, committing such resources to a pre-interstellar species destabilizes balance." "Balance that favors stagnation," Lyra replied sharply. "The Council fears what humanity may become without control. I see what they could become with partnership." Ethan stepped closer to the holographic projection, watching as energy lines connected Earth to distant star systems. "You're saying you can just change everything?" "Yes," she said simply. "Clean energy without environmental damage, medical systems that remove disease, infrastructure that eliminates scarcity." Ethan's thoughts raced, and in return, he asked carefully. Lyra met his eyes directly. "Autonomy," she answered. "Earth will not kneel. It will stand beside the Dominion as a sovereign ally." Varric remained silent for a long moment, processing, calculating, communicating with unseen forces across space. "The Council warns that empowering Earth introduces competitive evolution," he finally said. "Evolution is inevitable," Lyra responded. "Better to guide it than suppress it." Outside, the fleet shifted slightly again, but this time not in threat. Instead, new ships moved into position, sleek vessels unlike the warships, designed not for combat, but for construction, research, and resource transfer. Across Earth, telescopes and satellites detected the change instantly. Governments received encrypted signals containing data beyond anything human science had ever seen, blueprints for reactors that required no fossil fuel, medical sequences that rewrote genetic weaknesses, agricultural systems that produced food without soil. Inside the warehouse, Ethan felt the weight of history bending in real time. "You're giving us centuries of advancement," he said quietly. Lyra nodded. "Because one human offered help without expecting power," she replied, her voice softer now. Varric turned slightly toward Ethan. You influenced Imperial allocation without strategy, he said, almost as if still trying to understand it. I just didn't want her dragged away, Ethan answered honestly. Lyra looked at him again, and for a moment the queen disappeared, replaced by the woman who had sat in the rain. That is why this works, she said quietly. The holographic projection expanded, showing Earth surrounded not by weapons, but by protective energy arrays forming in orbit, invisible shields that would deflect threats long before they reach the atmosphere. Earth will be protected from external aggression, Lyra declared. No empire will approach without negotiation. Varric straightened. The Council has approved provisional partnership, he announced. Your personal treasury will fund initial integration. Ethan blinked. Treasury? Lyra allowed a faint smile this time. My reserves are vast, she said. I could fund the transformation of your entire planet 1,000 times over without destabilizing my holdings. Ethan laughed once in disbelief. You're unimaginably wealthy, he said, shaking his head. Wealth is meaningless without purpose, she replied calmly. Far above them, energy beams began transferring materials from distant resource stations to orbit around Earth, construction platforms assembling silently in space. Humanity watched in awe as structures formed in hours that would have taken decades. Inside the warehouse, however, tension had not fully disappeared. Varric's visor dimmed slightly as he spoke again. Be aware, Your Majesty, he warned. Other factions will not accept this decision peacefully. Your investment shifts power across sectors. Lyra's expression hardened slightly. Then they will adapt, she repeated. Ethan felt a chill at the commander's words. You're saying this makes enemies, he said. Yes, Varric answered calmly. It does. Lyra did not look afraid. She looked resolved. Humanity will not stand alone, she said firmly. Outside, the sky slowly cleared as the storm clouds dispersed, revealing the fleet no longer as a threat, but as a shield. Ethan looked up at the massive ships and then back at Lyra, realizing the full truth at last. He had helped a stranger in an alley, and that stranger had just invested the wealth of galaxies into the future of his world. The fleet did not disappear overnight. It remained in orbit for months. Not as conquerors, but as guardians, construction platforms circled the planet like patient architects, and slowly, carefully, Earth began to change. At first the changes were small. New research stations appeared in remote oceans and deserts, built silently with alien precision. Then came the energy towers, rising like silver trees across continents, pulling clean power from fields humans had never known existed. Fossil fuels became obsolete within a year. Power grids stabilized across nations that once fought over resources. Hospitals were the next to transform. Lyra's medical archives were shared under strict agreements, not handed over recklessly but taught. Guided, human doctors worked beside Aurelian specialists, learning techniques that repaired cells instead of replacing organs. Diseases that had haunted humanity for centuries were erased quietly. Without dramatic announcements, people simply stopped dying from them. Governments resisted at first. Some feared hidden control. Others feared loss of power. But Lyra had kept her promise. No nation was forced into submission. No flag was lowered. Instead, each country chose its level of partnership. And slowly, even the most skeptical leaders realized that Earth was not being ruled. It was being strengthened. Above the planet, invisible defensive arrays formed a protective lattice, capable of detecting threats light years away. Humanity did not fully understand how they worked, but they trusted the results. Pirates and rogue factions that once preyed on weaker worlds avoided Earth entirely. Word spread quickly across neighboring systems that the Aurelian Queen had claimed this world as allied territory. Ethan returned to his small apartment after the chaos settled. His life did not become glamorous. He did not stand beside Lyra at global conferences. He did not seek interviews or recognition. Most people never even knew his name. The official story said that a diplomatic breakthrough had occurred after private negotiations. No one mentioned a rainy alley or a borrowed jacket. Sometimes he still walked through that same alley at night. The city no longer felt ordinary. There were subtle changes everywhere. Transportation systems moved with silent efficiency. Pollution had dropped so low that stars were visible even from downtown rooftops. Children in schools studied star charts not as dreams, but as future destinations. 3 months after the fleet's arrival, the first joint human-Aurelian research vessel launched from orbit. It was not a warship. It was a bridge, carrying scientists and engineers from both species. The mission was simple: exploration without domination, growth without conquest. Still, not everything was peaceful. Varick's warning had been true. Other galactic factions watched carefully. Some envied the resources Lyra had invested. Others questioned her judgment. Intelligence reports from the Dominion suggested that rival empires were adjusting their strategies, testing boundaries, probing weaknesses. Earth had gained protection, but it had also entered a much larger arena. One evening, months later, Ethan stood on the roof of his building, watching the sky. The main fleet had reduced its presence. Only a few protective vessels remained visible as faint silver points among the stars. The air felt calmer now, but not empty. A soft shimmer appeared beside him without sound, and Lyra stepped into view. No dramatic light, no royal procession. Just her. Her form glowed faintly in the night, but she wore a simpler design now, less regal, more personal. "You always come without warning," Ethan said lightly, though he never truly got used to it. "I prefer simplicity here," she replied softly, looking out over the city lights. They stood in silence for a moment, watching distant traffic move like veins of light through the streets. "The council still debates your decision," she said eventually. "Some believe I invested too much." "And do you?" Ethan asked. She turned toward him, her glowing eyes reflecting the city skyline. "No," she answered without hesitation. "The Dominion measures wealth in control and expansion. Humanity measures value in connection and growth. I chose the stronger currency." Ethan smiled faintly. "You changed the direction of an empire," he said. "You changed the direction of a queen," she corrected gently. He shook his head. "I didn't do anything special." "You offered help without calculation," she replied. "You did not ask who I was, what I owned, or what you would gain." Ethan leaned against the rooftop railing, thinking back to that night in the rain. "You just looked scared," he said quietly. Lyra's expression softened in a way that few in the galaxy would ever witness. "That is a rare thing among rulers," she admitted. Far above them, one of the protective vessels shifted position slightly, a reminder that peace required vigilance. Humanity had taken its first step into the greater universe, and challenges would come. Rival powers would test alliances, economic shifts would ripple through sectors, and Earth would have to grow quickly to stand beside civilizations that had existed for millennia. But something fundamental had changed. Earth was no longer isolated. It was no longer vulnerable and unnoticed. It was recognized, valued, protected, not because it was strong in weapons or numbers, but because it possessed something unexpected. Lyra looked toward the stars. "Your species will face pressure," she said quietly. "Opportunities and threats, influence and temptation. Power will test you." Ethan followed her gaze upward, seeing the faint glow of ships that once terrified the world. "We've always been tested," he replied. "Yes," she agreed softly, "but now the scale is larger." For a long moment they stood together, human and queen, ordinary and extraordinary, bound not by treaty alone, but by a simple act of kindness. Across the galaxy, news of Earth's transformation spread quickly. Analysts in distant systems studied the sudden rise of a previously insignificant world. Some saw a future competitor. Others saw a valuable ally. But all understood one truth. The Aurelian Queen had staked her personal fortune and authority on a young species that had not even left its solar system. And she had done it because one human, tired and ordinary, chose compassion over caution in a dark alley. In a universe ruled by empires, fleets, and unimaginable wealth, the most powerful force had not been fear, technology, or strategy. It had been a calm decision to help someone who looked alone in the rain.